Hello and thank you for tuning in. My name is Trevor Cooper, I'm a solicitor. I'm going to talk to you about a few of the laws as they relate to dogs, and it's the laws in England and Wales that I'll be talking about today. And if I can firstly look at laws of ownership, it isn't a straightforward matter to establish as to who might be the owner of a dog. If we were talking about a house, we might go to the land registry and find out, and that would give us proof as to who the owner of that property is. But even though in law a dog is regarded as a chattel, it's an item, it's a thing, there is no one single document in and of itself that proves ownership. And the way we piece it together is to look at all of the available evidence, including any documents that may exist, and hopefully this will give us a pointer as to who indeed the true owner of a particular dog in fact is. Now, I don't know if you remember the old Lassie films. I'm sure there was an old Lassie film where there was a dispute as to who owned Lassie, and there was Elizabeth Taylor on one side of a room and Mickey Rooney on the other side of the room, and they were both claiming to be the true and genuine owner of this dog. And the way they resolved it in the film, to the best of my recollection, is that they both had to call out to Lassie, and whoever Lassie went to was the true owner. So you had Mickey Rooney, Elizabeth Taylor calling Lassie, and of course Lassie went to Elizabeth Taylor, and she was the true owner. So a happy ending. But sadly, in our cases in England or Wales, that isn't how we do it. So the kind of things that you can look at include a sales receipt. So if there was a sales receipt initially when the dog was obtained, what does that tell us about ownership? If there is a Kennel Club registration certificate, what does that tell us? But I repeat, that does not prove in and of itself that the person named on the KC registration certificate is necessarily the dog's owner. They may well be, but it's not ultimate proof. Similarly with a tattoo or a microchip, who does the database say is the owner of the dog? If the dog's insured, what does the insurance certificate say? What do the vet records say as to who may well be the owner? But there's other things that you can take into account as well, including who's the primary carer of the dog. So who's the person that walks the dog, that brushes the dog, that feeds the dog. You can also look at who pays for the dog's upkeep. That could be the true owner. So who's the person that pays for the dog's food, who pays for the boarding kennel fees. Now, a couple of things I will tell you is that once we know who the owner is, it's not actually that easy to lose ownership unless you mean to. You can lose ownership by giving a dog away, you can lose ownership by selling a dog, you can lose ownership by abandonment, you can lose ownership by a court order. But the only way that you could lose ownership without necessarily knowing anything about it at all is potentially through the interventions of the dog warden if your dog is astray and the dog warden has had your dog for 7 clear days or more. And there are circumstances in which, unless the dog warden knows who you are, they're not going to be able to serve notice upon you. And you can lose ownership after 7 clear days. Now, the requirements of the Control of Dogs order are there really to make sure that if a dog is found as a stray, that it can be returned to its owner with all due speed. And the requirement is that when a dog is out on a highway or a place of public resort, the dog has to wear a collar with the name and address of the owner inscribed on it, or on a plate or badge attached to it. So it applies even if the dog's on a lead. It applies even if the dog is microchipped. So the requirement is for the name to be on this tag. Now, it's the name of the owner, not of the dog. And so far as address is concerned, well, to my mind, a telephone number isn't good enough. That's not an address. Similarly with a postcode isn't necessarily going to be sufficient in my opinion. My rule of thumb here is if I was looking at this tag, would I be able to read it and work out where the owner lived? Well, a postcode just on its own isn't going to tell me that. It's the name of the owner, not the dog, and it's the full address of the owner that's required. There are some exemptions, I'll just run you quickly through them. It doesn't apply to a pack of hounds, it doesn't apply to a dog whilst it's being used for sporting purposes, it doesn't apply to a dog whilst it's being used for the capture or destruction of vermin, it doesn't apply to a dog that's being used for the driving or tending of cattle or sheep, It doesn't apply to a dog whilst on official duties for the armed forces, customs, excise or police. It doesn't apply to a dog being used in emergency rescue work, and it doesn't apply to a dog that's registered with the Guide Dogs for the Blind. Breach of this sort, so breach of failing to put on the owner's name and address, is a criminal offence. It's prosecuted by the local authority, and the offence is committed by the owner or the person for the time being in charge of the dog if they cause or permit the dog to be in a public place without that form of identification. Alright, well that's all I was going to mention today. This is very much a brief snippet of the kind of things that I talk about in my much longer seminars that I give. I give seminars to ordinary dog owners, if I can put it that way, at dog clubs, and I also give seminars to professionals involved in dogs. So if you want to be kept advised as to when a seminar may be taking place near you, have a look on my website, which is www.doglaw.co.uk. Thank you very much.